holy and precious name that I pray. Amen.
Hey, good morning, TN1. Hey, first off, let me just say thanks to you guys. So many of you have been kind to me. I honestly think the best job at any move is to get to be the encounter speaker because I get to see you all week long and get to meet your sponsors and your youth pastors and stuff like that. You guys have been super great. I have really enjoyed meeting you and talking to you, and I'm grateful for your kind response to me. Thank you for that. I kind of didn't have a choice as a kid in the sense that I kind of was just born to be a rebel. I don't know. Now, some people think that's cool, but I'm the youngest of 4 boys, so my older brothers all tried to boss me around, right? Then I had mom and dad, and then my sweet grandma always tried to boss me around, and she was sweet, and I wasn't. And she'd say things like this. She called me Robbie. She'd go, "Robbie, would you like to go help me weed the garden?" I'd be like, "Nope." And she'd be so offended, I'd be like, "Well, then what? I don't," And so I always had this resistance to being told what to do. In fact, there's, as I've gotten older, the wrinkles in my forehead have followed the track of a scar that goes from this side down to this side. And if you meet me probably later today, you're going to go like, "Oh, hey, nice," and then you're going to look up and you're going to see it right there. It's going to be awkward, but that's okay. I'm pointing it out. It's fair. I got this scar when I was about 3 years old. We had a swing set that my dad had made out of metal, and he had one of those old pressed metal swings. And over the years, people had gotten on it, and it kind of bent in the middle, and on the front of it had a sharp metal point. Well, I was walking outside in the farmyard one day, and I wasn't really paying attention. My brother Matt had been swinging, and so he had jumped out of the swing, and it was still going back and forth like this. Well, unbeknownst to myself, I was walking into the path of the oncoming swing. My mom from the house sees my predicament and comes out the door yelling, and she goes, "Rob, stop." And I turn around and go, "No, Mom." Blam! Right in the head kisser. I mean, it just knocked me down. My brother Matt remembers the story. He used to tell it where I just flew back. The next thing I remember is being in the doctor's office, them stitching up my forehead. It's just kind of in my life story to rebel. Now, sometimes, that's kind of good. Because here's the truth. You and I are both like this. We're all like this. We hate being trapped, right? Nobody really likes that feeling. We have a little dog in our family. She's a rescue dog, and she's cute, whatever. My daughter named her Sugar. That's a little too sassafras for me, whatever. But here's the thing, she's one of those dogs that grows long toenails. So every time she's walking around our house, we have hardwood floors, she sounds like she's playing the drums. And I'm like, "Stop it!" So when it's time to clip her toenails, I got to catch her first because she knows what's coming. I'm like, "Come here, you." She's like, "Not a chance." When I finally get a hold of her, she wigs out because she knows what's coming, right? She's like thrashing and biting and she's only this big, right? But here's what happens. When she finally realizes she's trapped, she curls up and she looks like a chicken. And you can tell everything in her is full of hatred for me. We hate being trapped. We don't like that feeling. That sense of being trapped kind of lends itself in our lives to this idea of rebellion. No, I refuse, I will not. It's important. Now, when we feel trapped, we tend to do one of two things. We either try to wildly escape, right, and run far away, or we hunker down and we try to build a fort to protect ourselves emotionally. Because here's the truth. Outside of some terrible things that have happened to a few people, most of us on a normal daily, in and out kind of business, we're not actually being, held in a prison camp or something. But sometimes emotionally, it feels like when we're excluded by our friends, when we are left out, when we are feeling like there's no way we're going to get ahead. Sometimes we feel so trapped by our own sin, we don't know what we're going to do. We tend to either wildly try to escape, or we build a fort to try to make sure that no one hurts us. When we feel trapped, it's bad. Now, over the years, I've learned all kinds of fun stories about different people who have escaped, from prison, things like that. Because, again, I'm a rebellious-natured person, those kinds of things have always interested me. In fact, one time when I was in college, I was part of a prison ministry, and I started reading books about prison escapes just to see what was going on, right? And I read this awesome story about a guy in World War II. He was a German pilot, so he's a bad guy, more or less. He's fighting over England. His plane is finally shot down. He lands in England, and he decides, that's it, I got to get out of here. So as he's captured, he punches the guy that's captured him, and he runs off. Well, he gets captured again. So they put 3 or 4 guys around him. He says, hey, excuse me, fellas, I need to use the restroom. They're like, okay. He escapes again. They're like, durr. I don't know, maybe British people don't do that. Maybe they're like, well, rats. I don't know, I'm just guessing, I don't know. And so he escapes again, and this time he was serious, so he crawls in this giant puddle of mud with just his nose sticking out to breathe. They walked past him 6 times. Finally, he inhaled, and someone saw the water move, and they caught him again, and he's like, argh. So they put him in a secure prison with a bunch of other people. No lie, this is true. His name was Franz von Wera. You can look him up. He digs a tunnel. No lie, he digs a tunnel out, and he gets all the way out. He escapes. He gets all the way to an airport. He's in an airplane about to turn the ignition when they finally catch him. He's like, you serious? They're like, okay, we're sick of this guy. We got to get him out of here. So they put him on a boat. They ship him to Canada. This is true. They ship him to Canada, and he's like, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. But you're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in winter. He's like, all right, when I get to Canada. So catch this. On a train going through the Canadian wilderness, he convinces some of his fellow prisoners to start a ruckus on one end of the train car. And while the guards are all looking, he jumps out of the window of a moving train into the black night of the Canadian wilderness. That guy wanted out. He makes it across the St. Lawrence River, turns himself in, because America hadn't entered World War II yet, turns himself in for illegal entry. The German consulate bails him out, smuggles him to Mexico, gets back, and he goes back to fight in Germany again. That guy was like, no way, no how, I don't care what you do, I'm getting out of here. Now sometimes, we just don't fight very hard, do we? We're like, man, I'm trapped. Nuts. What? I don't know, try a little harder. Well, I can't. Listen to this. They've found that even ginormous animals, elephants, horses, large animals, if they are convinced in their mind they're trapped, you can tie them up with a piece of rope that they can snap easily. But in their minds, they can't escape. Isn't that crazy? And they've done studies about this. Psychologists have done studies about this. That humans actually do that same thing. That when we are convinced that we can't escape, even if we could, if in our minds we're convinced we can't escape, we don't even try. How scary is that? How scary is it that you might be feeling trapped in here today, and yet there might be an easy way out. There might be a way for you to escape that kind of bondage, that kind of slavery. And instead of trying, you just go, well, sorry, probably won't work. Doesn't that seem problematic to you? That we would be like that? I think so. It's like we take chains, and even though we could easily get out of them, we find ourselves convinced we're trapped. We can be as mad as we want to. We can try our best to break the chains. But after a while, we just kind of get used to it, and we start realizing, oh, I guess I could eat. I guess I could, do my homework with the chains on. I guess okay. And we just kind of go through our life all chained up, not realizing there might be a way to get out of this. There's a man also in World War II named Viktor Frankl. He was a psychiatrist. He was Jewish. He worked in Vienna. He ended up being trapped by the Nazis and taken to a prison camp. And while he was in prison, he began watching himself and other prisoners because he was a psychiatrist, he was a doctor and a scientist. And he was like, who's going to survive and why? Why are they going to survive? And here's what he realized. If I don't make a decision that I want to survive, I'm not going to. Because people would die right and left, not just because of the gas chambers, but because they just gave up the will to live. And they would literally lay down and die. And so he would do all kinds of things like this. The German guards would say, stand right here. He would go like that. Yes, sir. And as soon as they weren't looking, he'd move this far over. He's like, you know what? I decided I'm going to stand over here. And he got out of the prison. He survived. He ended up writing a book about how we get the chance. We have all got the chance to respond to our environment and to the things that drive us crazy. We get the choice to chase freedom if we want. Even if we feel bound up, we get to choose freedom if we want it. Man. This kind of thing about rebellion and obedience. Sometimes obedience feels like the cowardly way out. Sometimes rebels become the heroes, and we're like, yay, guy who jumped out of train. We're like, wait a minute, he's a Nazi, he's a bad guy. But there's something, right? We're the American colonies, we rebelled against England, we're like, woo! And you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes being obedient is seen as the sissy's way out. Sometimes it's simply the easiest way out. So here's my question to you. What if both options aren't really all that helpful? What if being obedient to your desires and saying, okay, I'll do whatever you want me to. What if that doesn't work? But when you try to rebel and you go, I'm not going to do what you want me to, and you feel trapped, how does that work? What if somebody tricks us into rebelling against what's actually good? Oh, see, now this is really problematic. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve literally had everything. They had everything you could possibly want. They had all the food, they had all the resources, they had each other. They had God coming to walk with them on a daily basis. They had a job, they had a reason to live. They were participating with God in a perfect world. And all of a sudden, when the serpent shows up, here's what he does. He doesn't show up and say, hey, let's start a huge fight. All he does is get Adam and Eve to start doubting God. Now, this is a big deal. They start to doubt his character because the serpent shows up and he goes, did God really tell you that? Seriously? Oh, he's doing that. He doesn't want you to be like him. He knows that your life will be better if you do that. And he doesn't trust you with that kind of knowledge. And so Adam and Eve, they take the fruit and they cause death and destruction and sin and slavery to come into the world. And here's what happened. They exchanged freedom for entrapment. Freedom for slavery. Freedom for bondage. They thought they were rebelling against the master who was telling them what to do, like a puppet, Why are you doing what he tells you to do? And so they rebel, like it's noble, like they're brave and courageous for doing it. And they find themselves shackled to death, literally. Death becomes part of their life. Obedience and rebellion are this big contrast that we're talking about today. But let me read a text to you that you have already heard. You guys know this. We've already talked about this. Whoever believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and whoever loves the Father loves the child born of him. By this we know that we love the children of God when we love God and obey his commandments. And his commandments are not burdensome. For whatever is born of God overcomes the world. And this is our victory that overcomes the world, our faith. Here's what he's saying. He's like, listen, just because God tells you that here's the rules, they're not rules that ruin your life. Does that make sense? Is this a yes? That's a no. You see what I'm saying? When we were missionaries in Mexico, I had two little blonde kids. They were tiny, right? My daughter was 1 year old when we moved there. My son was 4. And both of them pale, blue-eyed, blonde. We didn't fit in, okay? My wife is 6 feet tall, has really, really shocking blonde hair and real pale skin. She's kind of got a lot of Swedish in her background. And she did not blend into Mexico, right? At the time we moved there, Mexico City was the kidnapping capital of the world. More people were kidnapped in Mexico City per capita than anywhere else on the planet. And here I am, I'm choosing to go there on purpose because I felt called to do it. I'm going to take my kids to this place where they have a very high chance of being kidnapped. It was terrible, I'll be honest. There were things about that experience I hated, and I had to learn to trust God in ways I didn't want to. But one of the things, here's what we did. We taught our kids, because of the danger around us, we taught our kids this concept. We said, obey the first time. If you have questions, ask me later. And the reason for that was if we were somewhere and that we, as grown-ups, were looking around trying to watch, if we saw danger, we could say to our kids, come here. And they would obey the first time instead of being like, no, Dad, like me. You see what I'm getting at? Now, that took some work, right? I'll be honest, because kids are, kids. And, but here's what we did. We taught our kids to mind and obey the first time, and then if they wanted to ask us questions later, they could. Now, did we do that because we were bad parents? Come on, I'm looking at you guys, I'm asking. Did we do that because we wanted to ruin their freedom and their fun? I did that because I love them. I love my kids more than I could describe to you in words. And the fear that I had that they would be hurt and taken from me was terrible. And my desire for them to mind me the first time had nothing. I'm talking about nothing. Zero to do with me trying to ruin their creativity or control them or do anything like that. Or to make their lives sad. It was so that I could give them all the things I wanted to give them. Fun and adventure and friendship and love and nutrition. All the good things in life I want to give my kids. But I knew if they didn't obey, they were in danger. And God knows that this is what's waiting for you if you choose rebellion against God. This is what is waiting for you. You become slaves to sin. That is straight out of the book of Romans. When we sin, we become slaves to sin. John, Peter, Paul, Jesus, they all say the same thing. Obedience to God is our way to freedom. Wouldn't it be fun if somebody taught you could just take the shackles off? Just get rid of them if you wanted to? I know there's people in here who feel trapped. I know there are. I've been a pastor a long time. But I promise, when you choose to rebel against God, that's what you choose to do. You put those back on. In John chapter 10, Jesus tells his disciples, I have come so that I can give my followers life and life abundant. If God wants you to have freedom, why on earth would you not take it? You know why? Because sometimes we feel like we can't. Sometimes we feel like there's no way out. But Jesus says when you obey his commandments, you get freedom. Right, by show of hands, has anybody in here ever done anything stupid? Right? The 4 of you who didn't raise your hands, you're lying. I know you are, because you're people. Now, I know right now, so if you ever met my wife, you'd know that she's the sweetest human in the world. She really is. And, the first time I met her, I'm like, nobody's that sweet. She really is. And she hates it when I use the word stupid. She's like, that's a mean word. And I'm like, well, sometimes it fits. Right? Because you've done stuff that you're like, oh, that was stupid. Right? Am I right? Okay. Usually what happens after you do something stupid is it hurts. Doesn't it? Right? My friend Tom's a farmer. He doesn't have any hair, and he works on tractors all the time, and so he's constantly banging his head on some farm stuff, and he's got little cuts all over his scalp. I said, what you got there? He goes, I got a hurts, don't it? That's what he calls it, hurts, don't it? And so you're like, okay, well, fair enough. So one time when I was a kid, my brother Matt and I we saw a documentary on World War II paratroopers, right? And we see these guys, and they're so cool because it's black and white, and the filmmaker's like, these men were the bravest of the brave, behind enemy lines. We're like, oh my gosh. And they're, and so you're showing from the plane, and they've got their Tommy guns and their cool backpacks and their awesome boots, and they're like, I don't care if we're not coming back, fellas. And we're like, wow. And so we watched this documentary, and we're like, we have got to try that. This is a true story. So we're sitting there in our little farmhouse. My mom was at work. She was a nurse. My dad was out in the field far away. And we decided we're going to have something really, really fun. We're like, okay, how are we going to do this? And we come up with the very obvious answer. You get a bed sheet, right? It's not that hard. So we're like, okay, well, how's this going to work? Because, you try to hold on to it. You know how this is going to work. It's going to slip out of your hands. So we tied big knots in the corners, and then we tied them together because we're not stupid. And then we're like, okay, we have our parachute. Well, we started off with bed sheets on our bed, but those are twin beds. And my brother Matt's like, hey, Mom's bed sheet is way bigger. I'm like, you make a good point. Well, of course, I'm like, yeah, but we're going to get, in serious trouble when Mom gets home. He's like, we'll put it back. Oh, that's why you're the older brother. Okay. So we decide we're going to get all this together, right? So we get the thing. We tie knots in the corners. We're like, okay, this is going to work. We're like, where's our airplane? We had a great big old barn. It's about 30 feet high to the top. And my brother Matt goes, let's jump off the barn. I'm like, you are a genius. I'm like, absolutely. So we decide we get the sheet and we climb up on top. And I don't know if you know how this works. Like when you're looking up at something, you're like, that's not that high. You get up there and you're like, right? You know what I mean? Like diving boards, that kind of thing. So we get up there and we're looking over the edge and I'm like, no way, not going to do it. And we're only about halfway up the barn, on this angle. We're standing there and he goes, hey, you go first. I'm like, what are you, out of your mind? I'm not stupid. He's like, what? You go first. I go, you're the oldest. This is your idea. You're the one who decided about but you go first. I'm like, And then he played the older brother trick that always got me. All right? I didn't figure this out for years. He's like, what are you, too little? Because I was the littlest of the four boys. I would be like, what? It was like a trigger he could push and get me to do anything. He's like, what are you, too little? Are you scared, little Robbie? And I'm like, shut up. Give me the sheet right now. In my head, right? I pictured what was about to happen. I was going to launch off of the barn. The sheet was going to go, and I was going to go, boink. I was going to land, and I'd be like, how about that, sucker? And then I was going to brag to all my friends. My brother, man, was too scared to do it, blah, blah, blah. And so he's like, okay, well, let's see it. So I threw the sheet over the back so I could, jump, and it would, do that. Took a couple breaths. Off I went. In my heart of hearts, I was waiting. What happened? Wham! Man, I hit so hard, I would go bang, and my knee came up and hit my face, and I was like, ow! And I remember why in the cartoons you see those little lights flashing, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, that hurt. And I'm laying there in the gravel and the mud, and I'm going, ow, and I hear this voice from far, far away. It's my brother. He's up on the top of the barn still, and he goes, hey! What? Hey, I know what you did wrong. You weren't high enough. So I did it again. This time, This time I get to the top, and I'm like, "No, you got to do it this time." And he's like, "No, this is totally going to work. You totally almost got it. It's going to work." And I'm like, "I don't think it's going to work." He's like, "It's totally going to work." I'm like, "No, you do it." He goes, "Seriously, are you going to be a girl about it?" And I'm like, "Shut up, give me that." This time, my knees were shaking, my hands were shaking. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And I was like, "But it's going to work because I'm high enough now." I jumped. Blam! Don't remember much about the rest of the day. Except that when we got home, my mom got home and saw her bed sheet all muddy, I was in real trouble again. Look, that was stupid. I got a black eye and a bunch of bruises and cut up my hands and hurt for days. But listen to this. We have a God, a Father, whose commands are not burdensome. They are for our freedom. They are for our joy. And then we decide that we're going to be rebellious. We're going to be like, "No, Mom." And we get beat up over and over again. We do stupid thing after stupid thing because we somehow think that being rebellious is going to get us what we want, when all it does is get us more and more of these. You guys, I know because it's in my heart. I struggle with rebellion. I do. It's still there. I still work at it. And one of the things I do when I pray almost every day, I say, "God, you can have my life. Take it if you want it." And I have found so much freedom. I'm telling you, rebelling against a God who wants to give you freedom is stupid. Y'all, don't be stupid. Be free.